You are beneath my caste, human. The words slid like venom through the still, crystalline air of the council hall, a venom that did not wound, but provoked. Around them, the vast amphitheater of obsidian and living light fell to a hush. Not even the spire serpents, coiled in suspended stasis along the archways, dared to shift their translucent wings. She stood tall, as if the gravity of this place bent around her instead of touching her. Her skin gleamed like molten amber, smooth and flawless, reflecting the twin suns whose rays filtered through the high dome. Lines of bioluminescence ran down her arms in steady pulses, alive with heat, alive with ancestry. Her hair, silver white, woven in ceremonial spirals, swept behind her like a comet's tail. Valarian de Kairos of House Saravan. Highborn of the war caste, daughter of a bloodline that had ruled star sectors since Earth still charted maps with ink. She hadn't blinked when she said it, hadn't flinched. Dominic Reyes smiled, not out of humor. There was nothing funny about the danger coiling in her gaze, but because he saw the hook, the opportunity. Funny, he replied, keeping his tone dry, almost conversational. From where I'm standing, you seem about eye level. A ripple surged through the council floor, subtle, then swelling into a wave of gasps. Even the Zyrithians, creatures of rigid formality and restraint, stirred visibly in their elevated thrones. Her caste had not been challenged by an off-worlder in centuries, not here, not on the day of Cor Valis, when traditions were more sacred than law. Her lips curled. Not quite a smile. You just challenged me, human. I'm aware. Do you understand what that means? Perfectly. A golden symbol shimmered on her throat, flickering once in recognition of the ritual. The arena's ancient systems registered the intent. The glyphs embedded in the floor flared bright blue, then red. Combat sanction confirmed. If you lose, she said, stepping in a slow arc around him, you forfeit all claims, all dignity. You may not even survive. If I lose, Dominic said, I was never worthy to stand here to begin with. And if, by some miracle, you win, her voice dropped to something dangerous. You'll invoke the right, won't you? First night. You dare invoke that right? Dominic looked her in the eye, unflinching. You implied I was less. I came to prove I'm not. The banners unfurled from the pillars above them. Fiery crests, ancient Saravan war standards. Metallic cloth caught the light, bathing them both in gold and blood-red hues. The nobles above leaned forward in their palanquins, fangs bared, glowing eyes narrowed. She had drawn a line, and he, Terran envoy or not, had stepped across it. 1 week earlier, Dominic had never imagined this would be how diplomacy began, with blood and sweat rather than signatures and treaties. But from the moment he stepped onto Zyrithia Prime, he'd known the air was heavier here. Not just with pressure, but with tradition, with expectation. They hadn't wanted a human envoy. The Empire of Zyrithia was proud, old, martial. Their beauty was sharp-edged, their customs carved from bloodstone and pain. Their language struck like a weapon, barbed, tonal, meant to wound the unprepared. Dominic, former linguist and ex-special ops officer, had taken to it quickly, but nothing could have prepared him for her. He'd first seen Valerian descending from the dueling ring, her skin flecked with blood not her own, her breath calm, her eyes cold. There was elegance in her violence, a terrible grace. She was bred for war, sculpted by generations of dominance. Her contempt for him was immediate, scalding. But there had been something else in the way she looked at him too. Something flickering, like heat above a forge. The more she dismissed him, the more he leaned in. The more she spat Earth's name, the more he smiled, listened, and picked apart her assumptions with his soft voice and steel gaze. By the third day, she was doing more than insult him. She was watching him. But he never expected to bait her into the Corvallis, and he hadn't expected to mean it. 2 days before the duel, he trained beneath Flamewind Canyon, where the heat, cracked rock and the air howled like ghosts. His mentor was a Zyrithian exile named Sara Wren, one of the only warriors who would spar with an outworlder. She moved with limping precision, one arm missing, replaced with a gravity-hardened prosthetic. "You challenge the heir of Serevan," she told him as they clashed. "She's not just fast, she's vision-trained. Her reflexes read motion before it finishes." "She hasn't fought Terran close quarters," Dominic grunted, sweeping low. "She won't expect how fast we are in gravity dips." "She's going to crush your spine," Sara snapped, throwing him hard onto the canyon floor. "But if you want to survive, stop fighting her body, fight her mind." Dominic tasted blood, nodded, and rose again. The night before the duel, he crossed paths with Velaryon in a corridor lined with bioluminescent vines. There were no guards this time, no pretense of civility. She wore a sleeveless wrap robe that shimmered faintly with her internal heat. He was stripped to his training gear, arms scarred and bare. They stared at each other in silence. The air trembled between them. "You still intend to go through with it," she said at last. "I do. Even knowing what the rite entails?" she asked, softer now. "What it means to my people?" "I read your laws, studied your customs. I know exactly what I'm invoking." Her eyes, like volcanic glass rimmed in starlight, searched his. For what? He couldn't tell. Then she turned, silver hair brushing his shoulder as she walked away without a word. When the arena was readied, the gravity shifted to high density, slowing movement and amplifying force. The gong rang. The crowd roared. She struck like lightning. No hesitation, no ceremony. A spinning kick scythed toward his jaw. He dropped beneath it, pivoted, swept her leg. She recovered mid-fall, using her momentum to flip behind him, claws extended. They clashed in a ballet of violence. She was fire and fury, radiant in her fury. He was measured, unrelenting. When she lunged, he folded. When she struck, he absorbed. She was trained to overpower. He had trained to endure. Blood spilled on the obsidian tiles. First his, then hers. Neither faltered. Each strike left them more breathless, more wild, more alive. Then, at last, a slip. Her footing faltered, just enough. He seized her wrist, turned her momentum, dropped her to the ground, pinned, his arm around her throat, not choking, just holding. Her chest rose and fell against his. Her fingers dug into his arm. "Say it," he murmured. She bared her teeth. "You bastard. Say I'm not beneath you." She didn't, but she didn't deny him either. The arena's systems pulsed. The glyphs flared. Her loss registered. In the Imperial Codex. The crowd froze. Then the sound rose. Not quite cheers. Not quite horror. Something between awe and dismay. He stood, shaking, bleeding, and victorious. The first human to defeat a Serevan heiress in sanctioned combat. And, with that, earned the right denied to generations of lesser species, the right of the first night. The doors to the sanctum hissed open not with force but reverence. Silent, gliding, carved from whisperstone mined from the moons of Vectile, a material said to respond to the mood of those who passed through it. Tonight it dimmed as Dominic entered, shadows blooming in its polished surface. The room beyond was bathed in low, golden light, the kind that softened edges and suggested intimacy without declaring it. Every part of the chamber seemed curated to a purpose: ritual, memory, submission, or defiance. He stood still at the threshold. Inside, Velaryon was waiting, not armored, not armed, but radiant all the same. Her hair was unbound, falling in silver-white rivers over her bare shoulders. The ritual silks clung to her form like starlight, sheer in places, heavy in others, as if the fabric itself mourned the surrender of her title in one breath and celebrated her unbroken pride in the next. She faced the far wall, spine straight, not offering him her gaze. 1,000 glyphs glowed faintly around the perimeter of the room, each marking a covenant, a vow, a binding. The rite of first night had begun. Dominic stepped forward, each footfall a deliberate choice. The silence wasn't cold. It was alive, tense, charged. "This was never meant to be real," she said without turning. Her voice was low, barely above, a whisper, but it cut clean through the quiet. "No one believed you would survive. I didn't believe you would." "You're not the first person to underestimate me," Dominic said, voice steady. "And now I am bound to honor a rite older than your species' discovery of fire." She turned slowly. Her face was unreadable. Her pupils had narrowed to slits, a defensive reaction. "You invoke your right as victor." Dominic looked at her, not at her body, though it demanded to be seen, but her eyes, the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers twisted slightly at her sides. She was a predator caught between instinct and law. "I invoked it," he said, "because your people understand power, and to them, refusing would make me weak." She stepped closer. "So this is politics. Nothing more." "I didn't say that." Her expression flickered. For the first time, a crack in the armor. Not defeat. She'd never allow herself that. But something more complicated. She stepped within arm's reach, and the heat between them surged. The temperature in the sanctum rose, not metaphorically but literally. Her body exuded controlled warmth, a biological trait of her caste. It was meant to be intimidating. Dominic didn't flinch. "You expected arrogance, gloating, humiliation." "Of course I did. But I came here to understand you," he said, "not to break you." Silence. Then her hand rose, lightning fast, and struck his cheek. Not hard, not gently either. Her fingers lingered on his jaw after, trailing along the line where heat had bloomed. He did not retreat. "You are a strange man, Dominic Reyes. I'm used to being underestimated." She turned from him again, this time slower. Her breath was deeper now, steadying. "The rite demands union, a symbolic one. For your kind, it would be consummation. For mine, it is something deeper. You are not merely claiming a body, but the part of me that governs honor, station, memory. If I give it to you, I cannot take it back. I know. Then tell me why you haven't touched me." He stepped toward her, not hastily, but with quiet certainty. When he reached her back, he paused. His fingers hovered over her shoulder, not yet making contact. "Because you haven't given me permission." She let out a breath that sounded almost like laughter, and yet wasn't. "You bested me in battle. You invoked the right. Permission is irrelevant." "It's not to me." She turned her head, just enough that he could see the edge of her profile. "And if I deny you now, then I leave. No claim, no retaliation. Your honor intact." She stared at him, and for the first time, truly saw him, not as a man of earth, not as a soldier or a diplomat, but as a force that had resisted every unspoken rule her world had tried to use against him. A force that chose restraint in the face of power. She reached up and took his hand in hers. The gesture was simple, ancient. A Zyrithian sign of trust. The glyphs around them shimmered, acknowledging the bond, locking it in memory. Her fingers laced through his. Not delicate, not gentle, intentional. "I don't want submission," she whispered. "I didn't come to take it," he answered. A long pause, and then, at last, she pulled him toward the low ceremonial platform at the center of the room. It was ringed in living flame, a kind of bioluminescent barrier that danced in time with breath. He stepped over it with her, the fire parting briefly to allow them through. She knelt first, as was custom, but looked up at him with defiance. He knelt after, facing her. They sat in silence, knees nearly touching, hearts beating audibly. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice a tremor wrapped in steel. "Is not for show." "No," he agreed. "It's not." They moved together, slow, cautious, navigating one another like borderlands long forbidden to cross. He touched her arm, and her breath hitched. She pressed her forehead to his, and his eyes fluttered closed. Skin against skin, pulse against pulse. No war cries, no audience, just two warriors, two heirs of different empires, crossing a line older than both. As the union deepened, the glyphs began to pulse in rhythm with their breathing. A soft thrumming, like the heartbeat of the sanctum itself, rose around them. The ritual was more than physical. It was emotional, neural. The Zyrithian rite shared memory, instinct, fear, a glimpse into the soul of the other. She saw, for the first time, the boy he had been, dragged through wars on Earth, trained to survive, conditioned to lead. She felt the ache of his losses, the pressure he carried to speak for an entire planet that wasn't sure it wanted him to succeed. And he saw her, not just the proud daughter of Saravan, but the child bred to lead, pushed to perfection, punished for any glimpse of softness. The weight of 1,000 ancestors pressing on her spine. The nights she trained until her muscles tore, so she would never lose, not even once. They gasped in unison, the vision fracturing, withdrawing as the ritual reached its crescendo. And then the room was still. The light dimmed. The glyphs fell dark. She rested her head on his shoulder, not in defeat, not in weakness, but in acknowledgement. "You'll never be beneath me," she whispered, "because you never looked up to begin with." He closed his eyes. We stand side by side. For the first time since the duel, her lips curved in something real. Not a sneer, not a challenge. A smile. Outside, the twin moons rose high above the spires of Zerithia, and in the heart of the sanctum, something ancient had shifted. Not conquest, not surrender, but something far more dangerous. Understanding. Morning broke with a sharpness that did not belong to Earth. Zerithian light came filtered through black crystal latticework, casting the chambers in patterns that shifted with the planet's rotation. Each fracture of radiance sliced across Dominic's bare skin, highlighting the marks Valerian had left on him, some visible, others not. He woke alone. The sanctum was quiet, stripped of its ceremony. No glyphs glowed now. No fire ring held them. Just the sterile stillness of aftermath. Like the silence after a ceasefire, too quiet to be peace, too gentle to be war. He sat up slowly. The silk bedding still held the warmth of her body. A trace of her scent lingered in the air, spiced metal and crushed violet, alien, unmistakable, intimate. He dressed in silence, but not without purpose. Outside these walls, perception would be everything. He couldn't afford to look disoriented. He was the first human to complete the rite of binding, and to emerge with his life, his mind, and his dignity intact. Barely. The doors hissed open before he reached them. Valerian stood in the threshold. She was no longer in ritual garb. Her armor had returned, sleek, obsidian, fractal along the collar with her family's sigil now subtly altered. It gleamed as if polished with blood. The change was not cosmetic, it was political. "Dominic," she said, voice unreadable. "You must come with me. Now." He scanned her face, trying to read what lay beneath. Urgency, tension, not fear. She didn't allow herself that. "What happened?" She turned without answering, her stride brisk. He followed. The corridors they passed through were wide and arched with living metal that reacted subtly to Valerian's presence, walls pulsing faintly in acknowledgement of her rank. Though she said nothing, she moved with fury coiled just beneath her skin. When they reached the high hall, Dominic understood why. There were others waiting, generals, priests, envoys from the outer colonies. 12 in total, each arrayed in ceremonial garb, standing in a half-circle like a tribunal. At the center of them stood High Consul Threesen, Vailarian's uncle by blood but long her political adversary. He turned slowly as they entered. "So it is true," Threesen said. The rite was completed. Vailarian crossed her arms. "You already knew that." "And yet," he continued, smooth as venom, "you did not announce it. You did not summon the council. You did not, how do humans phrase it, kiss the ring." Dominic stepped forward. "I didn't realize this was meant to be a performance." The gathered nobles shifted, some amused, some insulted. Threisen smiled. "I see the human retains his tongue." "And his honor," Vailarian added sharply. "You forget what the rite represents. You may not respect him, but Zerithia will. His blood is on our books now. He is written." "But is he bound?" Threisen's gaze narrowed. "Or was this union a mockery, a false ritual to secure your fragile control of the house?" Vailarian's eyes flared, not metaphorically, but literally. A flash of bioluminescence raced across her irises. "You call me a liar, uncle. I call this what it is," he said. "An act of desperation, a bloodline diluted by fear, a legacy corrupted by an outsider." Dominic spoke before she could. "Test me then." All eyes turned to him. Threisen arched a brow. "You wish to invoke trial?" "Not trial," Dominic said. "Truth speak." A murmur rippled through the court. Truth speak was no simple oath. It was a neural interrogation, conducted by the ancient psychics of Zerithia, being so old and so mutated by mental enhancement they no longer resembled their original forms. If Dominic was lying, about anything, his mind would tear itself apart. Threesen smiled, slow and cruel. So be it. The chamber of clarity was submerged. Not in water, but atmosphere, denser than Earth's, laden with compounds that made the mind malleable, transparent. Dominic sat cross-legged in the center of a shallow depression. Above him, the psychic being known as Variel floated, or perhaps pulsed, suspended in a womb of sapphire gas. Its voice was not sound. It entered through bone and thought alike. "Do you bind yourself to Vailarian of Zerithia freely? Yes. Did you consummate the rite without force, without manipulation, without deceit? Yes. Do you seek her downfall, her power, her bloodline's extinction? No." There was a pause. The gas around them pulsed crimson for a heartbeat, then cleared. "Do you desire her?" "Yes." The chamber brightened. "Do you fear her?" "Sometimes." Silence. "Do you love her?" The question echoed. Dominic's breath caught. The atmosphere trembled. "I don't." "No." The light flickered, then peace. A wave of cooling clarity washed over him. The gas withdrew. The truth was accepted. He emerged slowly from the chamber, unsteady on his feet. Vailarian was waiting outside. She hadn't paced. She hadn't spoken. She stood still, like a statue carved in rage. Their eyes met. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "I did. They were already planning to destroy you." She didn't blink. "And you?" "I'm not your weakness, Vailarian," he said. "I'm your proof." Something in her wavered. She stepped forward and pressed her palm against his chest, over his heart. "You're not mine," she whispered. "No," he said. "But I'm with you." Her hand curled into a fist against him. Not to strike, to stay grounded. Behind them, the echo of High Consul Threisen's retreat rang cold across the marble floors. The battle was not over, but the next one would be fought together. The storm began before the sky broke. Two suns hung low over the horizon. casting their double shadows across the canyon ridges of Zerithia's first meridian. But it wasn't sunlight that turned the rocks to fire. It was the burning descent of warships. Dominic watched them streak through the sky like serpents of plasma, trailing smoke and fate. From the forward balcony of the Aegis Spire, the capital's highest fortress, he stood in full battle attire, not a soldier's armor, but a bonded one's mantle. Woven from ceremonial cloth and kinetic mesh, it marked him not as a warrior, but as Vailarian's equal. He felt it now, the weight of that word. Equal. Behind him she approached. Her footsteps were soundless, yet he knew her presence like heat before a flame. When she stood beside him, the wind shifted, cool against his neck, charged with scent and static. "They come for me," she said. "They come for us," Dominic replied. Vailarian's jaw tightened. Her eyes, silver under sunlight, reflected not fear, but regret. Threesen has broken the conclave accord. He aligned with the Miraith. They will not just take the throne. They'll cleanse my entire caste. He won't succeed. He will, she said softly. If I do not die, Dominic turned sharply to her. No! If I fall, the rite dissolves. You are safe. If you fall, everything we've built burns. Vailarian looked away for the first time. Her voice was a whisper. You were never meant to be part of this war. You're wrong, he said. He stepped in front of her, hands steady. I chose this war the moment I chose you. In the sky, the fleet broke atmosphere. The first impact shook the spire. The battle began. They moved together. Like twin stars caught in the same orbit, Dominic and Vailarian descended through the fortress halls, a trail of resistance forming in their wake. He had trained under her command for weeks, not for this, but for her. His hands no longer fumbled over alien weapons. He wielded them now with purpose, if not grace. Every step beside her was a promise. I will not let you fight alone. The enemy broke through the lower gates. The spire's defenders fell back. Plasma bolts sliced the air. Dominic ducked beneath a fractured arch, fired into the breach, and pulled a wounded guard to cover. Vailarian surged ahead, her blade igniting like liquid starfire in her palm. She fought with elegance and death entwined, her movements a kind of music he couldn't hear, only feel in his blood. The tide surged. A drone exploded overhead. Smoke filled the corridor. Then a figure stepped through the haze. Threisen, clad in obsidian war mail, he moved with the calm of someone who believed the battle already won. Behind him stood two Miraith assassins, tall, mask-faced, with liquid armor and shimmering blades. So the bonded fools make their stand, Threisen said, voice dry. How poetic, Vailarian stepped forward. You betrayed your people. You invited our enemies inside our walls. I did what your mother lacked the courage to do. I evolved our bloodline. We must shed the weak. You mean humans? I mean you, he charged. Vailarian met him head-on. Their blades clashed with a sound that bent air. Behind them, the assassins leapt toward Dominic. He didn't hesitate. The first assassin struck with a curved energy sickle. Dominic dodged by instinct, barely avoiding decapitation. He fired twice, once into the knee, once into the throat. The alien staggered, then fell. The second was faster. She moved like a shadow, a blur of metal and intent. Her strike cut across his ribs. He felt blood bloom. He countered with his arm blade. Not perfect, not clean, but enough. She dropped. He turned. Vailarian and Threisen were locked in brutal combat. He was stronger, older, more practiced. She was faster, smarter, but she was tiring. Dominic ran to her aid. Threisen saw it coming. His strike pivoted, not toward Vailarian, but toward Dominic. Time slowed. Vailarian screamed his name. The blade descended. He raised his arm, and Vailarian's blade pierced. Thrai's heart from behind. The High Consul's eyes widened in disbelief. Blood poured over her hands. She didn't flinch. He fell. The battle ended with the sun's rise. The Maraith fleet, now leaderless, fractured under Valerian's retaliation. The remnants fled beyond the planetary rings. Victory came not with cheers but with silence, with ash, with exhaustion. Dominic sat outside the ruins of the spire, his uniform torn, blood drying against his side. Valerian stood nearby, still in armor, still distant, but not cold. "You saved me," he said quietly. "No," she replied. "You saved yourself." He shook his head. "Not from them, from myself, from believing I didn't belong." She knelt in front of him. "Dominic," she whispered, "when I first looked at you, I saw a lesser caste, a creature beneath tradition. But now," she touched his face softly, "now I see my equal." He leaned into her hand. "And I see the woman I would die for." "No," she said, "live for me instead." He nodded. Their foreheads met. And in that moment, no words, just breath, connection, peace. Months passed. Zerithia began to rebuild. The caste system that once divided its people fractured under pressure, and in its place, something new took root. Not equality, not yet, but possibility. Valerian took the throne, not as queen, but as imperator. And beside her, Dominic remained, not as consort, but as choice. Together, they led not just a people, but a future. Because love, born in defiance, made the fiercest weapon of all.